In this video, we're going to make a gasket. What they want you to do is take the gasket maker, either the Permatex here or the Honda version. I think the Honda's black, not red. And they just want you to goop all around here and stick it on and bolt it down. But I don't want to do that. I want to put a gasket on there. And I'm going to use the Fel-Pro rubber fiber sheet, part number 3157, and it says, you know, timing cover, fuel pump mounting, differential cover, distributor base, you know. It's sealing oil, water, gasoline. That about covers it. So let's get the outline drawn on here and cut it out. And I'm not going to do anything spectacular. I don't have a bunch of fancy tools. I've got a razor blade and a cutting knife, a modeling knife, and a Milwaukee cutter, which is really kind of almost sort of like this blade just about. You know, I used to have a hole punch, and I still might be able to find it, but I don't know where it is right now. I thought I sold it in a yard sale because I stopped making gaskets a long time ago. And I just decided to make this one because I just didn't want to goop it up. The service manual says check and adjust valve clearance. This dot right here. Every 150 hours. That's about every 10 to 12 years for the average lawn mower guy, non-business type. You know, you just bought it at Lowe's and mowing the lawn with it kind of thing. So we're going to use a brand new cylinder head cover, part number 12310-Z8A-000, and we're going to use that as a template, but you want to notice that we have to be careful. It protrudes out. We just can't lay it flat on here, thus the cardboard to give it some height. I may need 2 of them, and we'll just start working on the outline and go from there. Alright, the newer ones and all the ones for the 190 say Honda on it. Also, according to the book, the 190 is cast aluminum, and for all the other ones, the 160s are stamped steel. Oh, I see. This is the GSV 190. So all the GCVs are stamped. Got it. So the cast aluminum gets the gasket, and all of the stamped steel covers get the goop. But we're going to make a gasket. Now the book says when you remove it, you need to be careful because, you know, it's glued on there with the goop. So when you pry it off, it says to get behind the corners here. Try not to bend it, because if you bend it, you're going to have to replace it. And I tried bending this thing, and it is extremely difficult to bend. I mean, you can move it a little bit. See how I moved it just a little bit? But for the most part, I don't really see how you can damage it all that much. I mean, you really have to be vicious with a screwdriver. You see there's a little overlap here. So as you work your screwdriver in, you want to be careful you don't damage those. But then if you goop it back up like they recommend, or like they say to do, then it should seal. Alright, let's get back to making a gasket. Okay, step 1 is to select 2 corners and lay it on there flat. Maybe cut it out if you want it all the way flush, but I'm not going to do that. That gap's not too bad. You can always bend it up a little bit. So I'm going to work on this one corner. I'm going to take out this one corner, and that'll give me two sides. And then I can just trace out the cut marks. And by tracing out the marks on the outside, I can cut to the inside of the line to fit it in there. I'll show you. So I just took my ink pen, went all the way around. I went around the outside even though this is the gasket line. So I'll just trim that off later. But there it is. Also did the 4 holes. Now it's time to start cutting. So the first part I'm going to cut is right here on the corner because I want to retest it and make sure that I don't have to trim the 2 straight edges that are part of the original cut of the filter, of the gasket, I'm sorry. So here's my cut. Took out that corner, making sure that I do have a good fit. And another trick I used to do is just kind of make an impression too. I've also done that in the past, just kind of push on it. Well, I've drawn a line, but there's also an impression on there too. Alright, we're about to finish. There we go, just use scissors. Now we'll do our check fit. Make sure we have plenty of material. Looks like we need to cut a little more right here, get it to fit in there. And everything else looks good, and then I'll trim it across the top here once it's all fit in place. Here's our test fit. Should be uniform in both directions. There is no top and bottom. Alright, now the razor blades to cut out the holes. So the way I like to cut out the holes is put my finger back here so I stab myself. No, just kidding. I just like to cut an X in here. I'm going to have to do this on the table, but I just cut an X and then I go around. I don't try and cut it out completely. I do 4 cuts after the X. So there's my X. Now I'll just go around, and I'll go around the outside edge because the hole can be bigger. I really don't like the bolt to be screwing into the gasket. That's mainly because there could be alignment issues. So I'd like the hole to be just a little bit bigger. I also thought I'd get one of those hole punchers. You know, just the single one, looks like pliers or whatever. However, I don't have one. I just have a 3-hole punch. So I'm not going to align this up in the 3-hole punch and punch it out. I'm just going to cut them out. Alright, there are the 4 holes. Cut them out with the razor. Alright, next I'm going to cut this down to the top here, and then I'm going to go across, up, and over. Okay, I drew my line across here, and it terminates 1 inch from the edge. So if you look, you'll see 1 inch from the edge. So I'll go ahead and cut this out, and then we'll fit the final part. So I'm just kind of doing a rough cut right now. I'm not really on the line. And then I'll trim that out either with the scissors or a razor blade. Is up and over around the hole and back to the line here, which was it 3.5? Yeah, up to the 3.5 inch line. Okay, there we go. That was actually the hard part. Now, you need to notice that there is a piece right here, and what that does is it captures the timing chain. It's actually a belt, but the gear rides in here, and the valves, the tappets, are up in here. Of course, there's oil splashing all around. So that's what this is. So we will cut this out. That'll be easy enough. Just kind of need to either make an impression or take measurements and figure out the opening here and cut that out. That'll be a razor cut. So there's several ways to cut out the center. You know, you can just take your razor and get a big slash here and then work your scissors in and cut out along your line, or you can cut an X in there like I did with the holes. You know, there's all kinds of ways. It depends on how you make your impression and draw it on there. You can cut it out with the razor blade. So it looks like we have a 1/4 inch at the top, so we need a 1/4 inch gasket at the top and then 7/16 at the bottom, and that'll get us started. Alright, my spacing here for the bottom cut is 2.5. So I found the center, put in my center mark, which was 2 5/16 from the edge. I just put my ruler like this and did 2 5/16, got the center. Now I need to go split this out. Split this 2.5 out, so I need to go 1 1/4 in either direction. There's 1 1/4 to the left, and off I go. So here's what my pattern looks like so far. Now these are 90-degree turns, and the piece is kind of rounded here, so I can create that roundness after I do my 90s. Just kind of curve it out so that there's no stress points there, but it's not too important. The main thing is it doesn't collide with any of the moving parts in here. So we'll take that, and I walked it up, as you can see, from my center line. I have my mismeasurement. So anyway, I had to extend it out a little bit to get to my 2.5. Then I went up 3/16, over 1/4 inch, up 1/2 inch, and over 1/8. So that'll get me to these edges right here, and then I'll deal with going up and over and around the rocker arms. My goodness. Measure twice, cut once. So I'm going to come along here, go up, over, up, and I'm not going over that far, but let me make sure that all my measurements are correct. You see, I had to expand them. I misread my ruler. Measure twice, cut once. Okay. Having fun. I'm deciding to leave in, you know, my mistakes and just don't do a perfect cutout, and show you that, you know, you may have to cut out another piece entirely, because you go and you set it down and you go, oh crap, that doesn't fit. So anyway, now let me cut out the center, see if I got it. Also, I recommend when cutting these out, you think of it as like going through many sheets of paper. You know, you may not come through on the first cut. You know, you may have to go over it 2 or 3 times. Just, you know, think of like cutting through a phone book or something. Just real easy. Go deeper and deeper and deeper. You'll eventually go through if you use a razor. You do the big X mark, cut out the center, and go around with scissors. You know, when you get to the really thin parts, you could tear it. That's why I didn't do that. So anyway, also sharper is better. The sharper your tool, the less likely you are to make a mistake, slip, because that's when you cut yourself, really, is when you have a dull blade, not a sharp one. Okay, where was I? I was thinking about the olden days when I was a technician. Our instructions were to just install the gasket. We never gooped them up with anything on either side. I think the last time I gooped anything up, I did the valley pan gasket on a BMW. It was an M62 engine. So, and there's nothing in the valley pan gasket but air, and I just sealed it up so that coolant couldn't get in there if the system developed a leak. So anyway, so back in the olden days, the 70s I guess, we used to do one side of the gasket and stick it onto the engine and then put the cover on top of that. And then when you took it off, you had to scrape off the gasket, clean it up. There's always a chance of ruining the engine or whatever the heck the gasket was stuck to. And then, like I said, back in the early 80s, yeah, I'm that old, all the way through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, when I worked on limit torque actuators, pumps and valves, we never put anything on the gasket. So in other words, I would just put the gasket on, maybe a bolt here, a bolt through here to hold it, make sure it's lined up, stick it, screw it down, end of story. So here we are. Need to make sure that there's plenty of clearance for that gear to spin around and the tappets to go. And the gasket was nothing more than a sealant. You know, you got this really thin plate, and then you got the aluminum block, if you will, for the engine. And this kind of just covers up all the scratches and defects and everything, and just prevents a leak path as the oil splashes around. It's not under too much pressure. It's mostly a splash as opposed to, you know, 40, 60 psi like in automotive engines. But even then, you'll see on modern engines, what you'll do is you'll get a valve cover gasket, which isn't much pressure, and there'll just be a thin bead of silicone around it. You have robots that just put a thin bead of silicone, and then when you put it in place, it just squishes it out a little bit, creates a gasket. So even when you don't have paper gaskets, that's pretty much a thing of the past, especially when you can get into, you know, the 2010 and beyond, depending on manufacturers. And definitely in the 2020s. So, yeah, you just don't see paper gaskets anymore in automotive engines. Head gasket, you'll see a head gasket, but clearly a head gasket is not glued down. It's just put in place, you know. And it's a compression fit. So here we are with our gasket. So when I check the valves on the Honda engine, I'll just clean off all the goop and then put on a paper gasket. Alright, just as I'm cleaning up and throwing away all my little scrap pieces, I just wanted to say, when I adjust the valves on the lawnmower, I'll do that in a separate video, especially since the official procedure is to goop it up and not just put a gasket on there. Because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a gasket on there. Thank you for watching.